Well, welcome to another episode of the NTIP podcast, where we hear and learn from field experts who make the impossible possible. During the 2023-24 school year, the North Carolina IABS team, that is Integrated Academic and Behavior Support, designed the differentiated support plan to support school districts in the implementation of the multi-tiered system of support, also known as MTSS. Amy Miller's work with her colleagues and their state team lead, Angel Goodwine-Batts, truly differentiated support based on overall district needs. Many improvements were realized in just 1 year across participating school districts, as is evidenced in end-of-year assessment results for 2024. Amy Miller's journey has allowed her to be a voice for those without seats at the decision-making table, our children. Amy is a licensed and board-certified psychologist. She is a leader in the design, implementation, and sustainability of MTSS for K-12 education systems. She is an entrepreneur whose consultative services allow her to reach across states, K-12, and higher education systems. Amy's expertise has positively impacted education spaces at the school district and state levels. She currently serves as a district director of Integrated Academic and Behavior Systems, and we are so fortunate to hear and learn from Amy in this episode of the MTIP podcast. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes. We're so excited for you to be here today. And before we dive into our questions, did I miss anything in the introduction?
I don't think so, except for being a mother and a wife.
That's important.
Two things I'm very, very proud of. Yes, that's it. Besides that, MTSS is pretty much my singular focus in life.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you shared that because I wasn't going to put your business in the street.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we appreciate hearing that, the whole person. So now let's dive in. If you could, tell us what equips you to be an expert on the IABS MTSS framework.
Yeah, so I like to say that as far as restricted interests, I have probably one restricted interest, and it has become MTSS over the course of these 25 years. So I've been focused on helping to design systems that work for all students for academics and behavior my whole career. So I started as a school psychologist, like you said, and the training I received actually was in Ohio, and they were even back in the late 90s, early 2000s doing something called intervention-based assessment at that time.
Okay.
And that was really based in how do we measure how well students are doing with more than just classroom instruction. So that little extra dose that we call intervention, how are those students doing with it, and what do we need to do different if they're not responding? So it started kind of pre-response to intervention back in the Midwest states in the late 90s. And so I was involved with that. And then when I came down to North Carolina, I just naturally kind of fell into that work. First with RTI, and then became a state trainer for RTI, and then helped transition to MTSS. And stayed involved in that work throughout my whole career. So I consider myself so fortunate to be able to say that I've had this like very singular focus, and it's changed some throughout the years, of course, as we've learned more. But what the focus has stayed on is creating systems that will respond to the most number of students. And making the adults responsive and responsible for those, not the kids.
Not an easy task. No. Okay. Well, here, since you've mentioned working at the State Department, and for the edification of our audience, we were there together.
Yeah.
which was great, right?
Yeah.
We won't hide that.
Yeah.
So having worked at the NC State Department of Public Instruction, and teaming in the state oversight of IABS, describe the similarities or differences in your approach to this work now at the district level.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, so I worked at the State Department of Ed on a couple of different quests, so a lot of us have gone in and out in North Carolina Department of Public Instruction over the years.
Yeah.
And so each time I've gone back, things have kind of changed in the organization and stuff. I think that the things that are very similar between supporting districts and schools statewide, mostly districts statewide, and a district and the schools within a district is that systems implementation piece. So to me, systems are the same. They just change in their structure and flow as we move from school. Like a school itself is a system, just one grade level is a system. They all work together in a certain way. A school is a system. Then we go to a district and it's a system of schools, and then a state is a system of school districts. So all of those things together, the most important thing for me to keep in mind is that we have all these multiple different perspectives, multiple different competing priorities a lot of times.
Yes.
And to me, a lot of people think of MTSS as this, just layered intervention and instruction framework. But what it's really about is organizing our resources, including our people and our time and our money.
That's right.
In such a way that are going to work for large numbers of kids. So the similarities in just that systems thinking are the same. Like you just have to change the scale of it from state to district. You're still thinking about how do I connect all the pieces to make something that makes sense for kids.
Right, right.
The other piece I think is really similar, what I've learned over time, is the need to build relationships across all those different entities.
Yes.
So MTSS is, a colleague of mine said it was like an octopus. So it really spans out and touches everything because we're trying to create these coherent systems. And so you have to be able to build relationships across lots of people who have lots of different things competing for their attention all the time. So that's been huge. Those are two big similarities. As far as differences go, I think that some of the big differences is obviously the scale of it all. But going back to that relationship piece, the relationships become very important because there is a slight beauty at the State Department to giving advice and walking away. It's hard because you don't get to see things through to fruition.
Yes.
But a hidden little secret is that sometimes it's easier to give somebody, hey, you should try this. And then I don't have to be the one to sit in the trenches with you. And in a district, you're going to help somebody with something and then you're going to be alongside them.
Right.
Side by side.
Straight through.
Yeah. So I think those are probably the big ones.
And to your point, I likened the difference between being at the State Department, working with districts versus working within a district itself as, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, the last movement, and Ode to Joy. Da 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 da. Right.
Yeah.
So when you think about it, it's like you get to the last movement, you get to Ode to Joy, and all you hear is da da da.
You don't get it. Yeah.
It's finished. And and so it's, but then you get into the district and you get to see it all the way through to the end, right?
Yeah.
And not to say that we're not building those relationships, because I felt as though your team at the State Department did do a pretty superb job of building and bridging those relationships between district schools and the State Department. And so I appreciate you sharing those differences. Let me ask you this, though.
Uh-huh.
Within the district itself where you are, have you noticed implementation quality trends across the grade bands? Like, this has always intrigued me, and where are the greatest strides
Yeah.
or challenges happening right now?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think anyone in my district, and I actually just I was trying to find some model high schools for my
Okay.
high schools in Durham to visit, high schools that were models of MTSS implementation. And so I was actually looking at Florida just this morning, and
Okay.
Florida keeps a model MTSS school list. There are
Mm-hmm.
2 in the entire state of Florida that are model high schools for MTSS implementation right now. And Florida has been doing this work. We took the implementation instrument
Yes.
and adapted it from Florida. So they've been really doing this work for probably some of the longest.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that North Carolina and Florida haven't had model schools in the past.
Yes.
But for high school, but what I find over all these years is that we can get implementation starting to go in a high school setting, but keeping it sustained is really, really difficult. So that
Yes.
is, and the high schools in my district would tell you that as well. By far, high school is the most challenging place to implement.
Why do you feel those barriers are there? Like, what are some of them that, that they've shared with you, the high school leaders?
Yeah. So a big piece is that when we get a student to high school, this was designed to be an elementary model. I mean, it just was. RTI and MTSS was designed to be an early intervention model. So I try to put that out to high school leaders. Yes, it was designed this way. But our job is still prevention when we get to high school. We're just preventing different things. So,
Right.
but when we get to high school, we have these kids. I'm using my finger like this because it's like becomes this tumbleweed, right? Where maybe a first, second, third grader, they may just have some minor reading deficits, some minor math deficits. By the time they get to 10th, 11th, 12th grade, and it just has grown into this snowball kind of thing. So it's tough for the adults in the building to figure out what to focus on first, right? There's just too many things. Then you have all the just logistical constraints of a high school where you're talking about credits. Your job is to get them to graduation. That's your primary job. And so trying to make sure that we are intervening, we are providing things like basic skill assistance, but at the same time, making sure we're getting kids across that stage. It's really tough. And the best models I've seen, honestly, and kind of where we're having some conversations now are 2-tier models at high school.
Okay.
Yeah. And really thinking about core or tier 1 as everything we're doing across our content classes. But then in addition to that, everything we do as a building to keep kids on track with credit earning behavior.
Okay.
So, things like Smart Lunch, where we're just helping them complete homework, right? Test retakes, tutoring, every child having access to tutoring. So we have that all part of tier 1. And then tier 2, or our intervention layer, is basic skill intervention for kids who need that really scheduled into like a foundations type of course. So
extra dosage.
Yes. Yeah. So high school for sure.
You touched on core tier 1. And when we look at the integrated behavior and academic supports really do begin with a quality core tier 1, right? And no matter what grade bands we're looking at.
Yep.
So how is this message communicated so that the district and respective school cultures reflect this priority?
Yeah. So it has been very clearly communicated in Durham from the superintendent that we are focused. His opening message when he started in our district, and he started in Durham pretty much within a couple of weeks of me starting in Durham. And his very first message to all staff, he used the words tier 1 instruction.
Okay.
And so he really understands and wants this to be our first best teaching. That's where we need to put the majority of our effort. So that is communicated from the top. It is tough, though, sometimes to make sure that we're putting the action behind that,
Yes.
because it does take its resource allocation, So what does that really mean to allocate more resources to core? And that might mean taking some time away from intervention to make sure that we are really enhancing and intensifying that core instruction.
Yeah. I'm hearing that when it's the communication is coming from your lead learner for the district versus just coming from, say, your chief of CIA or coming from a different layer, a different level in district leadership. And that's important.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's important for that messaging to be consistent throughout.
Yeah.
And I would even love to say from the foundation straight through, because your leaders are undergirding all of the schools, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so then let's look at some of the data, right, for your district. The 2024 school performance grades, they show, and this is public, right? It's on the NC report card, right? So it shows that 24 schools earned a D or F letter grade. There was only one with an F, right? 20 schools are designated low performing, and 9 schools did not meet growth status. What are the top 2 to 3 challenges in implementing MTSS district-wide, and how is your team addressing them?
Yeah, I would say manpower is definitely the first. I mean, just to be honest, we are in the time when ESSER funding is going away, and it's very, it's very difficult for sure. And that's doesn't appear to be getting any better anytime soon. So for sure, just the funding and that leading to straight up teacher power. I think that we have tried really hard to tier our schools based not just on our letter grades and our growth indicators, but really on other indicators too. So we've actually, from Student Support Services, we tier by our culture and climate indicators too. So we really try to make sure that it's kind of a across the board whole group effort. Our CNI, our principal supervisors, our student support services personnel, really looking to see across all of these schools that have bigger challenges than others, what are we doing to put all forces on deck with those schools? It's not perfect, but that's what we're trying right now. Those are the huge, I would say probably the biggest challenge is deciding where to put those resources, how to distribute those in such a way that it works for all, and then really helping the leaders in the schools focus on keeping the main thing. Oh, and one more, which goes along with the manpower, but we are in a huge just public education crisis with hiring and retention of staff. Right. And so for my work, for both the cultural frameworks, because IABS leads the cultural frameworks in Durham, as well as MTSS, it definitely is constant, kind of this Groundhog Day of retraining and retooling and everything to make sure that we get new people. And I think the percentage in Durham of educators who are coming in that are not traditionally licensed, I know it's over 50%. It's so many.
Oh, that's high. Yeah.
It's really, really high. Don't quote me on a percentage, but it's really, really high. They said it the other day in a meeting. And so when we think about not just onboarding like new or beginning teachers, it's different than the onboarding of beginning teachers we had a few years ago.
Right. And that could in itself present a hurdle when it comes to continuity and sustainability. So then just thinking through that percentage, how are schools then equipped to onboard so that the weight of that work is not just, say, on your office?
Yeah, and I will say, we have beginning teacher mentors and stuff as well at the district office too. And we have a lot of great people at the district office to help kind of lift. I would say there's some creative ways that principals are kind of moving educators around their building to make sure that they don't have one whole grade level or one whole content area of new teachers. Sometimes that's not even possible right now. So, and principals are really protective of their teachers right now, rightfully so.
Yes.
And so they're really trying hard to protect them from everything that's not instructional.
Right.
And we are trying hard to lift as much as we can, at least from our office, from our department. We try very hard, and we've had a lot of conversations in Durham just about how does central office have good customer service to our schools. So if there is something that we would traditionally say, hey, you can go find this, or here, here's the answer, go look here, we will just give the answer,
Right.
We just have to bring our service to our schools up even higher because principals are taking on more, because teachers are taking on more, and everybody is just up to here.
Right. It's a lot. And how many are on your actual core team?
For IABS, for Integrated
Yeah.
Academic and Behavior Systems, it's just 3 of us.
Oh my.
Yeah.
With 51 schools.
56 schools.
56 schools.
Yeah. Yeah. So we split. So I'm the director, and then I have 2 MTSS specialists under me.
Okay.
And they split the schools down the middle. So they provide kind of the coaching and the ongoing support. We have an MTSS facilitator in each school.
That's good.
But it's just an extra duty position. So they're typically like a counselor or a social worker or an AP, something like that. But they get a tiny stipend.
Okay.
And then those are some of our direct lines of communication, just so that really the principal is really the instructional leader, of course, which makes them the MTSS leader in the school ultimately.
Right.
But the MTSS facilitator is just kind of that logistical backbones person.
In my experience, there's a model that I've experienced myself, and where you have multiple coaches for elementary at the district level, for middle at the district level, as well as for high. And I found that as that labor is really distributed, it can help with that continuity, that sustainability, giving the schools that more personal touch.
Yeah.
And so I don't know who holds the purse
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
But I know that if you could get a few more folks on board, that would really help the efforts that you're putting forth as a core team.
Yeah. Right? We would love that. We really would. Yeah.
Okay.
And
So
we
who do I
lean
need to
on,
speak
we
to
also,
for you?
yeah, thank you. We lean on, we have teaching and learning coaches and instructional coaches as well. So we lean on them. I think assistant principals are definitely somebody that we don't always have a completely direct interaction with them. It depends on what hat they're wearing in the school. But when we can get in with assistant principals, they seem to be able to kind of touch a lot of different things in a school and not be quite as bogged down as the principal, so that you can have more kind of in-depth data conversations with them and stuff. So assistant principals are kind of my next frontier to really and psychologists.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about behavior support and discipline reform. Okay, now DPS has used restorative practices for several years, right? I know they've used the circles before, and along with implementing capturing kids' hearts to address organizational culture and to shift the approach to student discipline. Can you elaborate on how the MTSS will support a decrease in discipline referrals and suspensions while shifting staff beliefs around discipline.
Yeah. So this is really exciting to me. And this has been, like I said, I've had a singular focus on MTSS for my entire career, which has included academics and behavior. So I've always been a behavior girl. Restorative practices, since I've come to Durham, I have been so excited to also help with that work. And be able to, what I'm trying really hard to do is be able to make the connection for people that restorative practices lives as a part of our MTSS framework.
Yes.
And one way we've been really trying to do that is, so we have a core behavior practices course and a behavior standard treatment protocol that has everything we expect schools to be doing for tier 1, 2, and 3 of behavior.
Really?
And then within tier 1, which tier 1 in our standard treatment protocol for behavior, tier 1, that lives a lot of the things we used to see in PBIS. So things like a behavior matrix, office managed versus classroom managed behaviors, positive adult routines, things like that, acknowledgement systems, all that, it lives in tier 1. But where we talk within that training about the importance of building relationships from staff to students, we try to conceptualize that is where our restorative practices work really comes in strong.
Okay.
So I'm trying to get people to realize that restorative practices isn't over here, but it's here within MTSS. It gives us a systematic way to build relationships with students. And we know that it's one of the highest effect sizes from Hattie is that teacher-student relationship piece.
Correct.
So that seems to really be resonating with people because we're really trying to keep this push of we're implementing school-wide restorative practices, meaning we're going to use proactive circles. At tier 1, we're going to use them for community building, for some academic content to keep kids in that community. We're going to use impromptu conversations and restorative language with kids. We're going to really take the mindset that we're going to separate the deed from the doer when we have behavior errors. So we're trying to just push all of that kind of tier 1 proactive restorative practices work inside of tier 1 of MTSS for behavior. So that, I can't remember if I answered your question, but I'm just really excited about that.
No, you did. And what I'm hearing as being a thread throughout is the importance of the integration.
Yes.
Communicating how the integration happens. Because so often, educators, there's so many things going on. And you have so many balls that are being juggled. But how do we then help folks to understand there's an integration? These are not separate entities. And it makes life feel a little bit easier at that point, right?
And we did just finish up. We had 4 sessions with principals and assistant principals for a day and a half long restorative practices training this spring. And 96% of our school administrators attended.
Nice.
For a day and a half out of their buildings.
Oh my goodness. Did you do role play?
I role play.
No role play? Oh my God.
Yes, we did do role play. So we actually DPS it was a really cool partnership between DPS Foundation, Peaceful Schools, North Carolina.
Great.
Durham Public Schools. And then we had the location was North Carolina Central. So we had a partnership between 4 of our Durham agencies, and brought all the school leaders together. So it's kind of reinvigorated a lot of our restorative work.
Of course.
So we're really excited for next year and just to continue that kind of pace of and messaging that this is not something different. This is all MTSS. This is just how we approach the work of building community and relationships.
That's awesome. I look forward to the day when all educators can really see that the MTSS is just a really great way to look at continuous organizational improvement.
Yes. Yeah.
It's just overall, versus let's not pull out the core. Let's not pull
Right.
out curriculum. Let's not pull out
Right.
how we're engaging students' behavior. It's all one.
It's all one. That's all.
And I think that's what gets people confused a bit because they think they have to do all the different things. Well, let's touch on attendance and engagement then.
Okay. Yeah.
So, chronic absenteeism is a challenge in many districts.
Yes.
And I know it is in yours,
Yeah.
especially perhaps at some of our high schools and even middle schools, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how does DPS utilize MTSS to identify and support students with attendance issues?
Yeah. So we, right as I was starting in Durham in fall of 2024, they were working on a standard treatment protocol for attendance.
Okay.
All of our standard treatment protocols are across departments. So with CNI, with our social workers, the behavior ones with our behavior specialists and our exceptional children's personnel as well. So attendance was really taken on between our social workers and our group, IABS.
Okay.
And so we, worked with them to say what is going to be our standard response.
Mm-hmm.
We defined it for what are our core attendance practices for all schools. What are the things we want to do to promote good attendance across all students? So we laid that out at Tier 1 for our Tier 1 attendance practices. And then we have Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions for attendance. We really don't have truancy court in Durham County.
Okay.
It really is not really a thing. So we rely very heavily on relationships and family engagement and building those trusting relationships. We have lots of different kinds of strategies within the attendance standard treatment protocol, but they really all kind of start with this idea of attendance teams, making sure that we're meeting frequently as attendance teams in the schools to problem solve and then remove barriers for students to attend school regularly.
And what constitutes frequently at the school level when those
for
teams
attendance teams? Every other week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, every other week. I think that in some schools it might be more frequent than that. It depends. But at least every other week.
Have you are you planning to do any type of surveys of the schools just to kind of look at impact the schools that were meeting more frequently as attendance teams to reduce absenteeism versus those that maybe didn't meet as frequently, and just looking at those numbers?
We had not. We haven't gotten that far, but I love that idea. We just haven't gotten that far. But I'm going to write that down and steal it from you.
Yeah, write it down, and I'll send you a contract, and we can talk more about. Well, no, I have just a couple more questions about the attendance and engagement.
And then I was going to say about the engagement. So we wrap the engagement work in as well with, so the attendance teams and the attendance standard treatment protocol are one piece, but then we do our SEL surveys, and part of our strategic plan is increasing sense of belonging on our SEL and our climate surveys. So we see it as all related. So we actually have a graphic where we talk about starts with this small tree of engagement, then attendance, then behavior, then academics, and the tree grows. And so that's where our team is in, handles the SEL survey and helping schools look at those results. So what we want them to do is, before there's an attendance problem, let's look at our SEL survey results and see what kind of trends we have again around students in their sense of belonging, if we can head off some attendance difficulties that way.
How often are you doing those surveys throughout the year?
So we do the Panorama surveys twice a year.
Okay. Okay.
And then we have a school climate survey we do once a year, and that's for grades 5th, 7th, and 11th. I think that might, I'm not sure if that's going to stick around, because with the Parents' Bill of Rights, there's some items in there that make it hard to administer that.
Oh, for sure.
So we have that. But yeah, the SEL survey is twice a year.
Okay. So you might you consider doing something internally, as a district?
Yeah, we're trying to think about, so our Panorama SEL survey for grades 4th and above, there's no problems. We don't need opt-in. It doesn't have those type of questions in it.
Right.
It's K-3 really that we can't administer. We're having a lot of difficulty getting that opt-in piece. But we can take a couple of those climate survey questions that we had in the climate survey that we still are interested in, and probably push them in. Panorama will let us push them into the SEL survey.
That would be good, because you don't want data to be skewed in any way. And we do need to hear the voice of all of the students, right?
Yeah. So it's important. And we are getting schools we just finished up developing a Canvas course to help them look at their SEL survey results and do some, we have SEL curriculum, so then do some SEL resource mapping between their student needs and what their curriculum resources have. So it's pretty cool.
I just thought about something. And so with all of the work that you are embedding in the surveys and ensuring that the work is going forward and is effective, is having that positive impact on students socially, emotionally, attendance, behavior, all the pieces you can think of, and then academics, like you shared before. I just want to understand then, how is this data then used by school improvement teams?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So we actually, I was just poking around in some NC Star today, and I was really proud of a lot of our schools.
Okay, good.
There's a lot of schools really making the connection and saying, they are using the indicators, especially A401, around tiered improvement systems. Not just that, but also around like behavioral and social emotional, like kind of well-being of students. They're really using those indicators, and then they're using the things that we have laid out in the strategic plan. And so they're using their SEL data to say they want to increase their own sense of belonging and how welcome students feel at school. They're doing that through their SEL curriculums. They're creating their MTSS teams and making sure that they have defined what they want to see at every tier, even more kind of concrete than what we have at the district level.
Right.
So I've actually poked around in the school improvement teams, and we have quite a few schools that I am highly impressed that they're making all the connections.
That is always warming.
Yes, it is.
Right.
Yeah.
And, just for the edification of our listening audience, when Amy mentions NC Star in North Carolina, NC Star is simply the platform where all schools are housing their school improvement plans, and it provides consistency. It provides monitoring and support from the district, from the State Department, and from your school improvement teams across the board.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's pretty great.
Yeah. So then how does your district monitor? Because I'm all about the monitoring piece, the evaluating piece. We support people, we hold hands, we gradually release, but then how do we know that what's being implemented is effective? How do you monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of the interventions? Let's just look at the attendance and engagement interventions.
That's a work in progress. It's a work in progress. So, like I said, our social workers most often lead those attendance teams, if not always lead those attendance teams in the schools. We have a director of social work, or she's the director of school student wellness and advocacy. So that director works with counselors and social workers. And she has a lead social worker that really keeps that ongoing pulse back to that job-alike role so that they can continually talk about how's it going, what do you need, how's it going, what do you need. So I think those are like really effective loops to keep kind of that pulse on making sure every school is acting in a proactive way for attendance.
Okay.
So I do think that is happening. I think we have gone back and forth so we use Panorama as our platform for housing intervention plans and our early warning system. We did not require them because we had so many kids with chronic absenteeism difficulties. We did not require schools in the beginning to use Panorama for every attendance plan. Because it would be put on the social workers who are already overstretched. Our fear was it would be put on the social workers. They're already overstretched, and every attendance plan would look the same, right? Because they would have a lot of the same strategies. But then we started kind of thinking through it, and we really wanted just a trail to make sure that we weren't missing kids. That's just the most important thing, right? We want to make sure we're not missing kids. Kids with chronic absenteeism or high daily attendance difficulties, they often move schools. And if there was never a plan in place at one school, then there's a chance that student's just kind of starting over, when they go somewhere else. At least if they move from school to school in Durham and we have an attendance plan in Panorama for them, it'll go with them.
Right.
So that's kind of our first stab at really monitoring some of that. To monitor MTSS as a whole,
yes.
We're trying to, of course, we're in the middle of FAM season, our facilitated assessment of MTSS. Yeah. We have about 95% of our schools completed right now.
Excellent.
Yeah. And we did the FAMD today with our district team. So that was great.
Wonderful.
So that's one way that we're trying to monitor. We're really trying to strike this balance, though, between saying, yes, we're using the FAMS to monitor how well you're implementing and provide you support, and also knowing that school improvement is an up and down process, and it is okay if you go up and you go down. We just want to give you support. But there's still some that I think hear it as we're being graded and we have to make all A's on this.
And that never helps because you just don't know where the problems are, or what the root of the issue is, so that you can actually address it.
Yeah. So we're just trying to build trust, right? We're trying to be
right.
And I tell our tiny team all the time that, like, if we are nothing else, we will be responsive. And so we will respond, and we will come out, and we will support, and we will hold your hand, and we will try to help you as much as possible. So I'm hopeful that through that, we'll build the trust up enough that we can monitor while supporting, so that people don't feel like it's evaluative.
Like an I gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always tough. It's always really tough.
It's a tough balance. Well, I want to talk a little bit about your professional development.
Mm-hmm.
When we think about allocating resources, you talked about that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to hear just a little bit more about your professional development opportunities to staff so that you can ensure effective implementation of the MTSS. You spoke about the Restorative Practices one earlier, but looking now, MTSS more global, what types of PD has been provided to staff?
So we are right now, have just kind of tried our best to begin mapping out what our plan is for 25-26 for MTSS.
Okay.
I don't know about, I know about me. And every single year after I provided PD, I think, okay, how am I going to do this better? This year, how am I going to get people to really get it, to really, really get it? That's been 25 years, but I'm still trying. So this past year, we have, it's my first year in Durham. I provided every single month building an effective and efficient multi-tiered system of support, open to all, just to get like a common language and understanding, because we still really needed to build that. What is MTSS and what is MTSS not? So that was something I offered every single month, open up, did it virtual. Everybody could come. And that was, the people that came really, really enjoyed that. The other things we really focused in on this year, because we had a lot of behavioral difficulties I think that's across public schools right now. So we really needed to, when we think about those trees of like engagement, behavior, engagement, attendance, behavior, academics, like growing to academics, we really needed to stop at that behavior piece and make sure that we had common understanding of all staff of what's best practices with behavior. Because if we can't keep kids in the classroom, then it doesn't matter some of the academic practices that we're trying to install. So we focused in a good bit on core behavior practices, provided that a lot. We came up with and put out behavior intervention practices for Tier 2 and functional behavior assessment and behavior intervention plan training for anyone, so that they could really understand how to develop a good intensive behavior plan at Tier 3.
Okay.
In addition to that, this year we worked on putting together progress monitoring training, but we needed to make sure that we had collaboration in that, because we're not the only people touching progress monitoring. So we brought in and really tried to collaborate with our curriculum and instruction friends, our psychologists, and our group and our behavior specialists to make sure that we had some good progress monitoring practices that we were all speaking the same language about. And then we'll push that training and supports out next year. For next year, we're really trying to scope it out in such a way that makes sense for schools. So we want to provide our professional development to schools next year alongside them using their data every time.
That's good.
So instead of us just meeting with the MTSS facilitator in each school, we are asking every MTSS team in every school to give us their dates, and we come in, we conduct data analysis hand over hand on their universal screening system data, beginning, middle, and end of year. We help them match their students to intervention, beginning, middle, and end of year, and talk about progress monitoring, all the 4 essential elements in the context of their real kids. So that's kind of how we have it designed and laid out throughout next year, and mimicking the same messaging from MTSS teams, to principals, to assistant principals, to our special education staff. So
in my mind, you're doing this 56 times at the beginning of the year, and then 56 times in the middle of the
Yes.
my math brain, and then 56 times towards the end of the year.
Yes, that is correct.
That is correct.
Across 3.
I wanted to be sure.
No, you got it. Across 3 people. There will be some pieces. Well, we'll meet with all the teams. For sure. Beginning and middle, and end of year will probably be the FAM. So we will meet with every team during that time. We won't do like a full PD with those teams as we plan, but we'll try to give the preparation to the facilitators and the principals, and then we'll have that is our goal, is to have real hand over hand time with those teams.
That made me a little fatigued.
I know, you look like you're kind of itching now.
I said, I'm not going to do 56 times 3 because that would just be overwhelming. But let's talk about family and community engagement very, very quickly here, because we're gonna wind it down. But what When we think about family and community involvement, these are vital for student success. And you have alluded to this earlier in our conversation. So how does your district involve families in the MTSS process, right? Like within the framework itself. I don't want to say process. Within the framework itself, okay, to ensure comprehensive support for students.
Yeah. Well, we do have a hard and fast line around inviting parents and trying our best to get them there once a student is receiving an intensive or tier 3 intervention.
Right.
We also try to link back to the school improvement team because that has a natural family connection there. So we ask that the school improvement teams they have to be talking about their data, and hence they are talking about MTSS somewhere along that way. So keeping families informed through that mechanism of what's happening across the school. And then when we did our FAMD today, we talked about our family engagement practices as a district. And this is one of those areas where we in IABS really have to lean on all the other arms of the octopus because we have some really great departments in Durham that work specifically in our family and community engagement.
Okay.
Durham is a strong community place for sure.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And so I feel like we do a good job of making sure we have a lot of ties back to that. Yeah, that's probably the biggest piece. And then we rely on our social workers a great bit to make sure we're getting outreach to those families that can sometimes be more difficult to reach.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, I have just one more question here for you.
Sure.
Thinking about continuous improvement and future goals, right? When you reflect on the progress that has been made in this just a short time taking the helm as director, right? For IABS. What are the next steps for DPS in enhancing the MTSS framework?
So one big thing that we've been tossing around for next year is really finding different ways to involve our district team. MTSS is everything, which makes it really difficult for one department to manage because it does just touch so much. And we have some great central office departments in Durham. And so we already have a lot of them at the district leadership table. I feel like we have some untapped potential, especially in our principal supervisors that are the direct lines to our school leaders. And so actually just last week, we had a leadership retreat for our academic services team, and our principal supervisors put as one of their goals to assist with the implementation of MTSS in all of their schools.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's kind of like a big next step for our team next year is to see how we can really enlist them as partners and like everything they do when they support principals, it's through a lens of MTSS.
Right.
Because we know the most important variable to a child's learning is a teacher, and the second one is the principal. So that's like a big goal for us for next year, I think. Yeah.
I've heard it said by a rather famous prophet, write the vision and make it plain on tablets so that whoever sees it can run.
Yeah.
And the finding is that with our greatest desires, right? Like that was written on the board is something that we want to do for next year, right? Principal supervisors. But at the same time, it's going to just be something that lives on that same paper, on that same board, unless there's a very clear vision as to what that needs to look like.
Yeah.
So that now it comes off of the paper, it comes off of the board. Now we're running. Now we're running with it. We're making it come to life, right? And so I do definitely wish you the best in putting that piece together, because it's going to be powerful.
Yeah.
It's going to be powerful.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, fingers crossed.
Yeah. So here, I just want to say thank you so much for taking time to join us today.
Yeah.
Our listening audience, I know, is going to learn so much from having heard from you with the 25 plus years of experience that you have in this one particular area. You've really taken the time to dive deep and stretch across. And so before we close, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listening audience?
Keep voting. Support public education. That's all I have to say is hug a teacher, hug a principal. They are working so hard every day. They amaze me. And we have some amazing kids out there that deserve the very, very, very best. So vote your heart.
For sure.
Yeah.
Your heart, your conscience.
That's right. Your soul. Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for being with us today. And I want to say in closing, Amy Miller, you are a true gift. Amy holds insights that, when we tap into them, can transform the landscape of learning for the top tier consumers, our children. The effective integration of academics and behavior support, coupled with realistic plans for accountability, monitoring, and sustainability on a consistent basis, is what gets results. Take notes from the Amy Miller playbook or connect with her directly for more insights. Thank you all so much for joining the MTIP podcast, where we are making the impossible possible.